We are going to start with the first method, and this method we are going to call it the northwest corner method. Northwest corner method does what? Once we have set the table, we are going to assign as many units as possible to the corner that is on the northwest direction. I don't know. Let me see if I can draw. Let me see if I can draw what the compass. So I don't know whether this is what we call the north class. And here we have the south, then the west and the east. Your geography. So if I were to come and draw this diagonal line, this is the direction I'll call the northwest. This is the southeast. But this is what I'm referring to. This is a point which will guide you as much as you assign the units to a cell that can take as many as possible, up to the point you have either satisfied the destination or you have exhausted the supply by that particular source. So one thing, we'll be assigning the units, yeah? Then we'll be asking ourselves, have we exhausted the units at that particular supply point? Have we satisfied the destination? So let's start. I've already set the table. The cost per unit of transporting the bag of rice from one source to a particular destination. I've not changed anything. Those figures are provided in the table. So our first table is this. Then we are going to assign as many units as possible to a particular cell that is on northwest direction, yeah, as we try to satisfy that particular destination, as well as we also try to see whether we have exhausted the supply or not. So I'll start. If I were to draw my compass here, I would actually have what? The cell that is onto the northwest direction here is actually the cell W1C1. The cell W1C1, although you can still call it C1W1, either way, but this is the cell we are referring to. We label the cell law-wise, column-wise. If possible, you start with the law followed by the column. So on column 1, row 1, here we have a cell. We are calling it cell W1C1, and this is onto the direction of the northwest. So if I were to assign some units on this particular cell, how many would I assign? And remember, you try as much as possible to satisfy the requirement, but you also evaluate whether you have exhausted the amount given or not. So this particular cell, it is going to source the units from source W1. And as you can see, the amount available from W1 are actually 260 units. So the requirement by destination C1 is 280. The question is, can the cell W1C1 receive 260 units from source W1? Yes, comfortably, we can assign those units here. Okay? But what has happened is we cannot assign anything from source W1 more than what we have already done. We have exhausted. So the balance there is equivalent to 0 amount. okay? Then we have the number of units, yeah, received by cell W1C1 equivalent to 260, but the requirement by that destination is 280. So we need to source for a balance of 20 more units, okay? These units are going to come from where? For sure, they cannot come from W1 because we have already exhausted, but they can come from either W2 or W3. But how? Since this law we cannot assign anything else, then we draw our compass from law 2 going downwards. Then our northwest corner is on this direction, and the cell that directs to that particular corner is the cell W2C1. So W2C1 can receive how many units if we were to do the assignment here of the units? We can only give 20 units to that particular cell. But before we do this, actually, can we receive the 20 units? From where? These are to come from W2, remember? So is the W2 possible to give us the 20 units? Possible from an amount of 168 here, you can see. We can get the 20 units from there. And comfortably, we'll go and assign those 20 units to that particular cell. So when we assign 20 units to this cell, it means we have satisfied the destination C1. And because we have assigned destination C1, then it means no more allocation will be done to that destination, okay? Then, and actually, like if you are to go back, look at this. The moment we assign the 260 to cell W1C1, it means we exhausted the source W1 units. And so these other cells here are going to be empty cells. There's nothing we can be able to assign there. Just like here, we can say that the moment we have satisfied the C1 destination, it means no more allocation can be done. And so this particular cell will not receive anything, will create an empty cell. Now, we have not exhausted the units by source W2. We still have a balance of 148 units, which we need to assign to some cells, okay? So how do we do this? We draw the compass alongside the cells which are not actually receiving, which have not received anything. We draw the compass again. And you see, I'm avoiding where I cannot allocate anymore. So the concentration is on this area reason I still have a balance here, and these two are actually not yet satisfied. So when we draw our compass, okay, the northwest corner is on this direction. We come and assign some units in this particular cell. But how many units can this cell accommodate? The requirement by destination C2 are 120 units, yeah? These 120 units are likely to come from where? They can come from W2 and W3 only. But as we assign, is it a possible case where we can assign all the units maybe from a particular source? Remember, the point is you accommodate as many units as possible from a particular source into a certain cell. And I'm comfortable to actually feed this cell with a whole 120 units coming from the balance that we had here of 148 units. And the moment we do that, the moment we assign to this cell, we have a balance of 28 units here. Okay? And we have actually satisfied this particular destination. So there's no more allocation to that particular destination. And the moment we do so, it means since there's no more allocation, this cell is going to be an empty cell. Then we are now left to satisfy destination C2. But how do we assign the units in that particular destination or to that particular destination? we are going to do the following. Again, we draw our compass, and again, remember, I'm concentrating on where the rotation hasn't been done yet. If I draw my compass, the northwest corner will be on this direction. So this cell should be receiving the units before the last cell down here. So I'm going to assign my units depending on the units which are available, and we have the W2 and W3 actually to comfortably give us some units. But how? This cell here, which we are going to begin with, can comfortably receive the 28 units, which were the balance out of the W2 source. And the moment we do so, we have actually exhausted that amount. We cannot assign any more. But we have not satisfied this destination. We have a balance of 200 minus 28. That should be 172. And the last cell here, there's no need for you to even draw the compass. It should receive the units, but the question is, where are they going to come from? And you can see these two being the same. It means the source W3 can comfortably give the cell W3C3 the 172 units to be able to comfortably satisfy this particular destination out of the balance that was not satisfied, 172 units. Now, the moment we have assigned the 172 units, there's no more allocation that will be possible. And we have actually satisfied, if you are to look at our work now, all the destinations, and we have exhausted all the supplies. And that should be the case. You must exhaust the supply, you must leave all the destinations satisfied. That is one of the requirements as far as the transportation is actually concerned. Now, once we have already assigned the cell some units, we now go back and we get what we call, I've assigned these the first time, we'll get what we call the initial transportation cost, which will base our argument on whether it is optimal. Optimal means the minimum or not. So we are going to find our transportation cost by doing the following. We'll multiply the units in each and every cell by the corresponding unit cost of transporting those units from the defined destination to, or rather defined source to a given destination. So when I allocate the units, this is how we get the initial transportation cost. There were 260 units, yeah. The unit cost is 100, which we have multiplied here. And we do the same up to the last point where we have 172 units transported at a unit cost of 140. And the total amount comes to 66,400 shillings. The question is the solution of 66,400 shillings as the transportation cost optimal? In other words, is it the lowest? Is it the figure we can call the minimum cost? What we do is to check for what we call optimality by finding out whether it is possible to move some units from one cell maybe to another. Checking for optimality means the solution that we are having of 66,400, we subject it to a test to find out whether there is a possibility of moving some units from one cell maybe to another to make the solution of 66,400 somehow smaller. And therefore, if that is the case, or there's such a possibility, it would mean a better solution does exist. How do we do this? To check for optimality, class, we first of all check for degeneracy. Degeneracy is a situation where you find out whether the number of field cells equals to the number of rows added to the number of columns less 1. If they are not the same, then we say a degeneracy occurs. In a rare case, such will actually be the situation. But if it does, there's a procedure to deal with a case of degeneracy. Now, our field cells are how many from our work here? We have assigned some units in cell W1C1, W2C1, W2C2, W2C3, and finally W3C3. How many are the field cells? We have 5 field cells. How many rows, how many columns do we have? Rows are horizontal, there are 3. Columns, there are 3. Again, a vertical. 3 plus 3 minus 1 will give us a 5. So the number of field cells are equating to the number of rows plus the number of columns minus 1. And this means there's no degeneracy. A degeneracy occurs when number of field cells are less than the number of rows plus the number of columns minus 1. If that is the case after you have done the assignment of the units into the cells, then we say the problem degenerates. It's impossible actually to finally have a solution to the problem following the normal process. There should be a special case for that. Now, our problem does not degenerate. There's no degeneracy in that number of field cells, which are 5, are equating to the number of rows added to the number of columns minus 1. So, if the problem does not degenerate, what do? You compute what we call the shadow prices. A shadow price in LP, we said, is an extra amount that I may be required to pay to obtain a unit of a scarce resource, okay? So if there are negative shadow prices, then the problem is not, or rather the solution to the problem is not optimal. I repeat, we evaluate the shadow prices for the unfilled cells. If there are shadow prices which are negative, then it means the solution to the problem is not yet optimal. And we do the variation of the shadow prices using 2 methods. Number 1 is what we call the step method or the step-in method. And here we are stepping in from one stone to another. We are going to look at that. And we also have the modified kind of a method, which argues of the figures to be assigned to the columns, as well as the laws with the traditional variable of the first law being always a 0. So I've also given you the outline from that handout on the 2 methods on how to evaluate the shadow prices for the empty cells. My empty cells here, I've marked them using a red color. Let me even mark them again. That is an empty cell. This is also an empty cell. Another one here. This is also an empty cell. And these are 4 empty cells. So how do we evaluate for their shadow prices using, let me start with the stepping stone method. We are going to start with W1C2 cell, this cell here which is empty, and I'll be going round anti-clockwise. I don't know, when you draw a clock, this movement is clockwise. So I'll be following this other direction. I think it's the one we call anti-clockwise. So we are starting from this cell here. We'll take its figure, the unit cost there on cell W1 C2 as an empty cell. We are not touching the field cells that will come under the MODI or the modified method. We'll be taking the empty cells under the stepping stone method, and we are going to compute the shadow prices directly. If there's these cells are the ones we call stones actually. If there's any cell that will be empty, then you don't use its unit price to compute the shadow price. So we'll only be utilizing the field cells. Take note, I'm computing the shadow prices for the empty cells, but I'll be using, number one, the unit price for the empty cell that I am computing its shadow price for, and I'll be stepping on any other stone whose cell is actually filled in. That is what I'll be utilizing. Meaning, if I come across along my way that there's a cell that is empty, I will actually be skipping it. And that's why we are calling the method stepping. You're using the stone that is actually having a cell which is filled to compute the shadow price for an unfilled or an empty cell. So I will start. This particular cell has a unit price of 80, and where you begin, the value is supposed to be positive. So we have plus 80, and we'll be alternating our operation. So from a plus, the opposite of this is a minus. Then I've said I'll be moving anti-clockwise, and my neighboring cells are actually filled in. So I'm good to go and utilize those particular cells because the surrounding is actually filled. So 80 plus minus, we have 100. I've used this cell here. Then I move to this stone. It is actually filled. I'm alternating the signs. I have 140. And then this neighboring stone here is also filled, and it will take a negative sign. I'll have an 80 here. And the result here, let's find out whether it is positive or negative, because that is our concern. We have 80 minus 100, 140 here minus 80. That would give us what? 40, and it is positive. So that is the shadow price of our first empty cell W1C2. I've used the surrounding. I've gone round using the anti-clockwise method, yeah, as I actually get the value of that particular shadow price for one of the empty cells W1C2. You can also move clockwise as long as the surrounding, for example, you can be able to use the cells which are actually filled. So as you do so, for me, I've used the anti-clockwise, but I've said you can also move the other way around, but you stick to the same procedure for all the cells to which you're computing their shadow prices. We are about to be logged out. You log in immediately using the same credentials. So we have computed the shadow price for W1C2. When we come back, we'll continue with these other empty cells.